Here's the. This is the Pentagon, the Department of Defense's description of what took place. Earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike. This is September 2nd, against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility, which is basically everywhere. TDA is a foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the U.S. and Western Hemisphere. No U.S. forces were harmed in this strike, nor were any animals harmed in the production of this propaganda blitz. Beware. Thank you for this, this is the Trumpian part. Beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And this is what the strike looked like. And I know everyone in the U.S. feels safer now.
No, for sure, especially if you actually, let's take for a minute, let's play with the fact that it's true, which I hardly can, but for a moment, let's think if that's the case. If that's the case, that must have been Eastern Venezuela, and it would have gone actually more to Europe than the U.S. So I think they're doing Europe's bid in that case, if it was the case. But still, I'm not sure. I mean, there's no actual proof, as you know, of the identity of the crew that was on those kind of small boats, by the way, called, here in Venezuela, called peñeros, which is usually the most common one, used by fishermen or for tourists or for smuggling in general. I mean, it doesn't have to be what the Pentagon says regarding that. And in any case, I mean, we're talking about how 11 people on the boat, which you don't actually see 11 people there, but and if it would be a drug smuggling operation, you wouldn't need 11 people to occupy the whole space of the boat, because these aren't that large, to mix both things and not bring into logistical problems there, as in speed, as in weight, So lots of missing information here.
Well, it's said, I mean, this is the official, or this is the story that we're getting about this boat, and so we'll talk about all of the other political and geopolitical dimensions in a second, but I'm trying to unpack what happened here, because our own media in the US isn't doing a very good job. And I think everyone's sort of befuddled and mystified at what took place. But the general story is that the boat launched from San Juan de Unare, and it was heading here to Trinidad and Tobago. Dramatic music. You can see its path. So it's eastern Venezuela, which is very close to Trinidad and Tobago. And then basically the Pentagon waited, and it was using Southcom was using either a helicopter or a drone, and it waited until the boat got into Trinidadian territory before striking it. And the story is that, I mean, San Juan de Unare is like an area infested with narco gangs, which you can talk about in a second. And if they took out this boat, but if it was going to Trinidad, then it was moving away from the United States, and then it would be taken by some cartels, I guess. This tiny boat, that load would maybe like support like a bachelor's party in Europe. So what's going on here? Is this what really happened?
I mean, it's hard to prove. Still, there's no, for the time being, I mean, there's no actual proof, not even from our side. Some social media accounts throw in some names and some allegedly victims, but still there isn't enough proof of that either. It would have geographically and socially, it would make sense. We're talking about an extremely remote area of Venezuela, of the Venezuelan coast. It's a very paradisaical place, by the way. It's beautiful. And and yes, the reputation of all these areas has been like, it's always been exposed not only to drug trafficking, but smuggling in general, contraband in general, and also not long ago, also like a point of exit for people to go to illegal migration to go to Trinidad. But that only basically suggests the possibility of being there. And yes, of course, there's also a lot of, because of how remote it is and how complicated it is to reach there, it eats up everything for any kind of illicit activity. Now, how come you also, the other thing, it's calling all this seamen, all these sailors, all these fishermen, TDA, they shouldn't be in that case. They can bring in anything from anyone. That's a basic dynamic of contraband. And mind you, that still at this point, we're just relying on what we have seen around. Neither the U.S. nor even Venezuela's government in this case. I mean, after the suggestion of the possibility of being AI, which I defer, and I also follow what Diosdado Cabello said back in 2 days ago, our interior minister, that basically based on the same hypothesis, acknowledging just for a moment the hypothesis that it was in fact this, it's just a mere brute show of force that goes against every rule of indictment of any drug smuggling operation. You don't need all that weaponry just to catch that, and it's not that hard either to catch any person that's.
Yeah, they could have interdicted the boat in cooperation with Venezuela. Has this happened before? Have the U.S. and Venezuela cooperated to interdict drug boats in the past?
Yeah, officially, in official terms, it ended in 2005 when Venezuela withdrew from working and collaborating with the DEA, because at that point in time, El Comandante Chavez basically denounced that he was using for intelligence infiltration, and also some of the managed deliveries were too ambiguous and too unreliable. So they basically decided we can do this ourselves, and we can still work with all the international bodies that count in this kind of things. But I know, and you can see it anywhere, there are specific operations that have had some sort of collaboration in time. And for example, the case of Loco Barrera, this is 2012. This was a case with a major cartel leader that was arrested in Venezuela. And I know that there was cooperation with other international bodies, including Interpol and I think British police. That's what they wrote about back in the day. So it's not that it doesn't happen before, but I do imagine that for a very long time it hasn't happened between the U.S. and Venezuela.
Okay, and we have here some evidence of who the people might be who were killed on this boat. This is, a local Venezuelan account saying TikTok is full of videos of people from San Juan de Onare lamenting the deaths from the narco lancha. So they're calling it a narco lancha. Check the comments. And this is a TikTok.
Yeah, that's a classic sentimental vallenato, Colombian music, which is.
Oh, and yeah, that'll get us demonetized. So I'm going to have to.
Yeah, exactly. It's widely popular here. But the problem with this until now, I don't want to be disrespectful if they in fact are victims. Yeah, they talk about several videos of TikTok, this social media user, and they just show one static image with the vallenato music, and then a lot of foul-mouthed comments stating that these people died, and also accepting the fact without any evidence that these people were actually involved in drug smuggling. But still, I can't find it. I can't rule it completely as as proof, as definitive evidence of what actually happened. It could. I mean, it's an extra layer of information that we can use, but it's still. And if you check out other social media accounts, if you pair us at least a little, I mean, the social media environment, there's not much other than what we're seeing right now. So you can't immediately rule out it was actual victims, which is quite possible. And this actually, regardless of everything else, it was a crime. But at the same time, you can also call it a psy-op, a complementary element of all this. But who knows? I mean, we still have to wait. There's for more information to emerge and to actually have a more comprehensive picture of this specific clip.
And it was, I mean, it was obviously a psyop, but psyops often build off reality. I mean, exactly. This is San Juan de Unare in like 2019 with the poster here is calling them malandros, like just like local criminals who run a narco trafficking gang, and they're fighting with the Venezuelan government forces, which are trying to crack down on narco trafficking. I think the psyop here gets into the bigger narrative, which is, yes, there is some narco trafficking in that region, but is it connected to Nicolas Maduro? Is Maduro directing this? Is he trying to, as Juan Orlando Hernandez, a U.S. ally, the president of Honduras, said, shove the cocaine up the gringos' noses in order to destabilize our society in coalition with Iran and China and all the bad actors in the world? And this is what the Pentagon and the Trump administration and Marco Rubio are saying is, and the other point is, was it, let's say that was a narco lancha, let's say that was a drug boat. Did it belong to Tren de Aragua? Because my understanding is in San Juan de Unare, Tren de Llano, another cartel, a local cartel, is more powerful. So would they even know it was TDA, which is the cartel that may not even exist anymore, that they're trying to connect directly to Maduro?
Yeah, and Tren del Llano, it's more in the central plains of Venezuela, but yeah, they actually expanded through, from central Guárico state into the eastern part of Venezuela some years ago. That's a fact. I mean, there's no question there. And Tren del Llano was pretty active last year as part of the components of the color-coded unconventional warfare attempt during the aftermath of the election. So in that sense, what I'm saying here is Tren del Llano actually exists. It also has got an important beating the last month, but still. Also, you don't need all these big names. Sometimes they're just small groups that can do the bid for any other organization that's interested in moving something to the Eastern Caribbean and probably to Europe more than the US. I mean, there's no actual geographical sense of sending drugs from that point, because into the Eastern Caribbean up to the US, when the Atlantic, it's right there. And you can send it to all the bigger ships to send it or to Africa for that matter. And and also mind you that trenes, as in trains, are also the sum of all smaller organizations that build up and small cars that altogether become a tren. That's the actual origin of the definition of the name. So it doesn't even have to be either TDA, which I completely doubted in this case. Actually, TDA also, it's more history. I mean, all the sales of Tren de Aragua, the former Tren de Aragua, were actually more focused in migrant smuggling, which is sometimes even more easy and profitable than drug smuggling. And the other thing about this is that it could be anyone for that matter. But also, one more time, there's no actual proof that this was actually a narco lancha, a narco boat, as they say. Maybe because of the 4 engines, that could prove something. But also, those kind of high-speed boats are also used for fishing. So we still haven't have the definitive take on this. And yes, part of it could be true. And yes, that doesn't mean that you're going to connect it directly to some sort of state effort, which is basically the baseline of the narrative of the whole cartel de los soles thing, which is like up to this point, it's like an on and off tag they use in time for the last 20 years. And if you can even go further back in time, and to see that actually it's not a name that came during the Chavista years, but before that, during the Fourth Republic years, when there was no actual quarrel between the Venezuelan government and the United States. So you have to focus on that other element to see that. And also, there's no official body, international body, or government that actually follows this other than the people that are now being part of the weird, quote unquote, coalition of the willing that Marco Rubio is setting up. So here we are right now. It's uncertain. What I think it's really important here, Max, it's the rhetoric. It's the scaling up of rhetoric and the amounting into something worse after this. Remember that like yesterday, there was this also weird post by the, and unproven one yet, by the Pentagon saying that 2 Venezuelan airships got too close to one of the US destroyers near our shores, and they said it was a provocative action and they ought to be careful, kind of like the Magnum PI beware thing that Trump said on his own post.